a lot in turning very intricate information into messages which will resonate with different audiences. People need to realize that regardless of what a lot of populations in Africa think in terms of human rights and women's rights, the first universal human rights chart to ever have been known in the humanity has been written or said somewhere in the ancient empire of Mali. It is the Mandan Charter in 1222. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as we know it in the contemporary era by the UN, happened in 1945. So I think it is very important for people to realize that there are instruments which are here, just like CEDAW, which is the International Covenant on the elimination of all form of discrimination against women. In terms of women's rights, promotion and protection around the world, it is the international reference. We have also the Maputo Protocol in Africa, which is the sister or the African complement to this CEDAW, and which, in my opinion, is just the African Women's Right Charter by African for African. And it is very important for me to bring that to the attention of people, because sometimes in all this conversation, it seems like whenever we are talking about women's rights in Africa, it is something imported. While somehow, even in terms of political participation, for example, in my country, I'm a Senegalese, and women's participation in politics have always been a reality in terms of even the first person to ever vocally and clearly mention independence in West Africa at the conference of Cotonou was a woman, Rose Bass, a Senegalese. So it is very important for people to just take that from now into consideration. And based on that, coming to that gender-based violence, when will we start just getting back to our cultural, social cultural realities where African social, cultural fabrics have always somehow sheltered women in the ancient times? So recently in Senegal, for example, in the month of May, in 1 week, we had 3 cases of rape, out of which 2 ended with death. This is offline gender-based. And there is one young Senegalese fashion designer, which is very vocal, which actually made comments online because people were very shocked. We had, a very spontaneous reaction down the street, and even the president has to clearly state and give order to the Ministry of Justice to start working on a project to criminalize rape and pedophilia in Senegal, just to give you an idea about the media uproar it was. But that Senegalese young fashion designer citizen also actually made a post on Facebook, and there was a man, one of her contacts, which actually made comments. He was probably joking, but he actually was very kind of violent in a way that he was literally calling for a woman to be killed because that's what they deserved. I'm not trying to shame him, because at the end of the day, people realize that it was not ill-intended, but based in the context, people were just fed up, and it created some kind of reaction. And the lady, that Senegalese fashion designer, actually was so pissed, and she actually asked him to stop, but he kept on. And at one moment, he removed the comment, but she made screenshots, and she was like, okay, I'm going to turn you into a kind of example, because this is this kind of small details which seems harmless, which actually shows a lot about what the problems are. And then she went to file for a police report, and at the end of the day, she was the one ended being harassed, because people were like, how dare you send somebody's son to prison? So this is the kind of example. It is very, I wanted to bring this example as how intricate it can be to navigate not only in digital spaces, but in terms of as women, but also in terms of gender-based violence, because no, in the spectrum of freedom of expression, sometimes people don't realize where to start and where to stop, and where the other is totally entitled to actually start acting also against you because for whatever reason. So this is one example out of others, but this is what I wanted to bring as a case for in our conversation table, because I think it can be very interesting to hear the perspectives from different countries, but also in terms of strategies and approach to how to deal with this kind of situations.
Thank you very much,
If
Nyanya.
I could add to what she was saying.
Please, please.
I think just because it's online does not make it less harmful. And we live in a society whereby I've seen victims go to the police and they ask you one thing. So did they come up to you and beat you physically? No. And the police is like, no, then you're okay. You see, we need to move from that mentality. And that's why we need different stakeholders to come in and give us a solution. Because if we keep saying, so long as it's online, it's okay, especially in the African context, where I think our grandmothers grew up in a very violent society, and violence was physical. So long as they've not touched you physically, they feel that it is okay.
Thank you, Cecilia, and thank you, Nyanya. Nyanya spoke about some of the legal frameworks that we have. And before I come back to the violence, I would also like to give an example of a Ugandan politician. But I would like to invite a gentleman who is seated right there. Is called, I don't know if I would pronounce his name right, Abubakar. Job. Please, could you come and give us more insight on the legal frameworks? I know you have interacted with this. If you could feel free and just, I don't know if you could speak from where you are, or you could just come here if we could have the mic. Yeah, because I know this is something that we've all seen happening, and sometimes we've ignored. Sometimes it does not really raise so much eyebrows when we talk about some of these things, but they're really happening. Please.
Okay, Jane, I'm really bad in interpreting, so can you?
Mais peut-être que vous venez ici pour le micro, et après je vais faire la traduction.
Merci et bonjour. On me demande d'intervenir un peu sur la liberté d'expression des femmes au Sénégal. Il faut dire qu'au Sénégal, nous avons ce qu'on appelle une loi sur la parité. C'est une loi qui permet qu'il y ait une parité à l'Assemblée nationale entre les femmes et les hommes. Donc chaque liste de partis politiques qui se présente à l'élection législative doit présenter une liste paritaire, c'est-à-dire 50% femmes, 50% hommes. Et cela permet une expression des femmes au niveau de l'Assemblée nationale. Je m'essouffle, hein?
Yeah. I'm going to translate quickly so people can keep up. So Monsieur Diop is coming to speak to us in brief about the legal framework for freedom of expression of women in Senegal. So he's beginning by telling us about the parity law in Senegal. I can't remember the translation in English, but basically it's about women's political representation, and that electoral lists have to have 50% women and 50% men, and the goal is for women to be more represented in politics.
Et cette loi a déclenché au niveau des femmes un pouvoir d'expression. Et ce que l'on a constaté sur Internet, c'est que les femmes auparavant n'avaient pas un espace ou des espaces où elles pouvaient s'exprimer. Et aujourd'hui, avec Internet, elles arrivent à pouvoir prendre la parole et s'exprimer ouvertement. Mais le problème à ce niveau, c'est d'abord la question de l'analphabétisme des femmes, qui a un impact très important dans notre pays et un peu partout en Afrique. C'est seulement dans ces dernières années que nous avons une tendance où il y a plus de femmes ou de jeunes filles à l'école que de jeunes garçons. Mais pour toute cette génération, les femmes ne sont pas souvent alphabétisées et cela freine un peu leur usage d'Internet.
So one of the consequences of this law on parity in Senegal is that women's expression, especially online, exploded. And so Monsieur Diop is explaining that one of the challenges to women's full participation online is the levels of illiteracy among women in Senegal, which is still quite high compared to men. So this is what prevents them from being more present online.
Okay. Et je vous donne un exemple aussi par rapport à la liberté d'expression des femmes. Récemment, ou il y a 2 ans, il y a 2 ou 3 femmes qui ont été arrêtées juste parce qu'elles ont exprimé leur opinion. La première femme qui a été arrêtée, c'est une grande musicienne au Sénégal qui s'est exprimée dans un groupe WhatsApp et qui taxait le président de coquin. Et pour cette simple expression, elle a été mise en prison. Et il a fallu un tollé au niveau national pour qu'on puisse la libérer parce qu'on ne pensait pas que pour l'expression d'une simple opinion que cette dame soit arrêtée.
So now Mr. Diop is explaining some cases where women have been criminalized for their expressions online. So one famous musician in Senegal criticized the president and was put in jail for 1 month. Popular protest against her imprisonment eventually led to her release.
Ok, l'autre dame qui a été arrêtée, c'était une journaliste qui a caricaturé le président. Bon, et au niveau du gouvernement, ils ont jugé que c'était une caricature qui portait offense au chef de l'État et puis elle a été mise en prison. Mais par contre, au plan juridique, il n'y a pas de discrimination entre les hommes et les femmes. Il n'y a pas de loi qui est conférée à l'expression des femmes. La loi au Sénégal ne fait pas la différence entre hommes et femmes.
Could you summarize it? Jean has summarized here.
So the second example was a female journalist who was also imprisoned because of her negative caricatures of the president. And Mr. Diop is saying that the problem is that within Senegalese law, there's no distinction between men and women, but clearly women are being treated more harshly in terms of defamation.
Et pour terminer, du point de vue du code de la presse ou du code des communications électroniques, toutes les lois qui encadrent l'Internet, on ne trouve pas, selon notre connaissance, on ne trouve pas de loi discriminatoire entre hommes et femmes. Et ce qui confère que la liberté d'expression est reconnue aussi bien aux hommes qu'aux femmes. Mais la seule limite, elle est plutôt culturelle et traditionnelle selon nos coutumes, qui fait que jusqu'à présent, les femmes ne sont pas libérées du point de vue de l'expression. Merci.
So in conclusion, Mr. Diop is saying that while there's no legal distinction between men and women in terms of freedom of expression in Senegal, that in practice, cultural norms impose restrictions on women's freedom of speech, that when they are critical of political figures, that they are more likely to be harshly treated with harsher penalties. Perhaps I can take advantage of having the mic to speak a bit. Okay, so speaking, from the position of a social media company, Facebook, I think I'm really interested to understand some of these contradictions between the cultural norms in our sub-Saharan African societies that maybe have a tendency to be more controlling and conservative, but also the historical undercurrents where women have been at the forefront of the independence movement, where women's bodies have been used in acts of protest in places like Nigeria. And I think that as a platform, Facebook is really interested in understanding these nuances because we spend our time trying to encourage expression while keep people safe. And in order to do this effectively, we need to understand clearly the nuances in our societies. So, for example, we have a policy on what is colloquially known as revenge porn. We call it non-consensual intimate images. Initially, we only removed images of nudity. But through consultation with communities across the world, it became clear that it's not only when women are photographed in the nude, it's also when women are photographed in compromising positions, either in sexual positions, in undergarments, etc. So that policy has evolved over time to recognize the way that women's, I would consider it like fragility or vulnerability in our societies, is exploited to silence them online. And what I'm really interested in hearing from the panelists is, where are these intersection points where cultural norms of, I would say, conservatism and control of women intersect with online platforms that make the spread of information and the sharing of images so viral? And how can we strengthen the responses, especially of platforms like my own, to protect women in the public spotlight, the women who are in the public eye, to make them more secure in position taking online and more able to defend themselves? So maybe I give the question back to my panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. You want to say something? Okay.
I think Cecilia will be talking about digital security because that's her expertise. But I would like to raise about the ways in which we do research around women's involvement on the online spaces, and because that's some sort of my area of work. So within a firm, we try to work with around 4 thematic areas that are looking at access, looking at online gender-based violence. We look at artificial intelligence and its problematics, and we look at digital labor and gender, of course. I think within the context of this panel now, trying to understand why there is still less access for women in the African continent, and also why women are not visible as much on the online spaces. From a methodological perspective, then we kind of need to move away from gender mainstreaming and try to really, really pay attention to intersectional or intersecting matters that really push forward the analysis or the understanding of the why question. I can give you one example. Like, it's a well-known kind of narrative about Rwanda. Many people say Rwanda has an amazing coverage and access, and they are very good in terms of, as a nation, very good in terms of exploring different technological innovations. But at the same time, there is an amazingly paradoxical reality that there is still lower access of women. Like, women are not still enjoying the technological innovations. Now, that is just a data. That is just a descriptive thing. It's a reality. But then I think the feminist politics comes when one asks, like, why so? Why is it that women are not there? Then we push this a little bit further, and then we start trying to understand the social and cultural values. We try to understand the policies we have. We try to understand other things too. And then it gives you a bigger picture of what is behind the conversation. I want to give one more example and I will leave. And this is not even me, but I have read it from one of the work that has been done by Grace Network. And they were doing this research in Zimbabwe, and then they were doing the research within the Zimbabwe University and Computer Science Department. And the researcher sees a female student just standing outside, and while the male students getting into the computer space and do their work. So she always finds it very interesting, and she goes and she asks them, like, why are you outside? And say, like, no, we are waiting for the boys to finish and then we can get in and work. And so in that way, like, you can see that this is accessed publicly, but you have this ingrained cultural values and fear and intimidation that you need to give a space for them first and then you can get in. So if we don't, like, if we had to say, like, okay, in a STEM, within this context, for an argument's sake, if we would say in Zimbabwe, STEM girls are not as engaging with technology as men, that's just one reality. But when you ask it further and say, like, why so? Then when you have this kind of revelation, then you would understand, like, actually, it's not that women are not interested or women are not invested. It's more because of other factors that contributes to that. And it's the intersectionality of it that makes it even more difficult for women to enjoy technological innovations.
Thank you, TG. That's something that it's not nice to listen to. Female students waiting out for the male students to first finish using the computers or accessing whatever they want to do. It's really not nice at all. And I would like to find out from you, Cecilia. Jean talked about the safety, how we can keep safety. And still, Jean, I will come back to you to tell us a little more, because I think most of us here use Facebook and we're on different social media. We would like to know, as an individual, how do we manage to keep safe online? But Cecilia, I would like you to say something about Safe Sisterhood, how this can help us, how this can help women in this space, women in the digital era, to keep safe and still manage to access information and still manage to express themselves. Thank you.
As I said in my introduction, I'm a Safe Sister Fellow. So Safe Sister is a product of Internews Washington, D.C. and Defend Defenders Uganda. They're also in the room. Haley, can you wave, and Natasha? Yeah, they introduced me in this space, so I'm very excited. Safe Sister is a fellowship, a digital security fellowship for women in the East African region. This was mandated by the issue of online gender-based violence, and they are trying to build capacity to increase digital security trainers to be able to train women on how to stay safe online. So far, there are 31 of us, Safe Sister. So one thing I was taught by Natasha is safe sisterhood. Like when you go online and you find a woman being vandalized, a woman journalist or a woman politician, as a woman, try and put in your voice. It's our different voices that are going to make the society know that this is wrong. But when we as women also act like the people online, or you find someone putting an emoji laughing, you're also being encouraging that behavior. So sisterhood comes in when we try to come together and try and defend this woman. And I would also like to respond to the issue of culture. We are from different cultures. What is accepted outside there is not what is accepted here. I remember I went for a training and I was telling them never put nude photos online, and somebody asked me, it's my body, you can't tell me what to do with it. And where I come from, that is very wrong. So I feel like different culture also bring in
Do you have something
an issue
to add?
of controversy.
Especially interested in
where do you draw the line between
the power
content moderation
dynamics
and freedom of
can
expression?
be dealt with earlier within the lobbying and advocacy work around reforms of particular bills or issues that are raised.
See what they pull down and what they keep online.
Okay,
Would you like
thanks.
to say something?
I'll speak briefly about what Facebook is trying to do to keep different communities safe online. So there are 5 elements to our approach to safety. The first is our policies. So for those of you who are on Facebook, I hope that you've consulted our community standards. Our community standards are a set of rules that determine what content is allowed on the platform and what content is removed. And so to give an example, we have a whole policy on hate speech. And under hate speech, we define protected categories, which include women, which include sexual minorities, which include migrants in some cases, especially in Europe, and which include people with disabilities. And so the idea is that there are categories of individuals who use our platform who, when they are being attacked, either verbally or through images, need to be protected. And in those cases, we remove the content. But like we've been discussing here, it's a nuanced discussion. Sometimes, as Cecilia was saying, you want to condemn images that are hateful or harmful. So then we allow it, right? If you put up an image of a woman being kind of use profanity against, and you say this is a terrible way to treat women, we allow it because we think that it raises awareness about negative portrayals of women and how we need to combat them. But as you said, it depends on the culture. Some cultures would find even using that image offensive, but these policies need to function at the global level, so we try to find a standard of safety and awareness that allows everyone to use the platform in the same way. There's also a lot of tools at Facebook to protect the type of experience you have on the platform. As an individual user, you can like and unlike people, you can friend and unfriend people, but you can also create groups. And within groups, there's many different ways of moderating the content that appears on that group. You can ban people, you can ban profane language, you can report abuse, you can even assign roles to your page. So let's say you have a page group and you don't want to be the only admin, you let your other group members choose what kind of content is allowed, what kind of content is promoted, and which content is removed. There's also a lot of effort that Facebook makes to help users be more effective in their advocacy and campaigns on our platform. So some of the work that I do in my role is to help at-risk populations, help protected categories to understand our security settings, our privacy settings, but also be more able to promote content that advocates their position. So women's rights groups, digital rights groups, etc. And then just like this panel, we do a lot of consultation with external stakeholders and with experts to understand the nuance in the different markets in which we operate. So here on this continent, Francophone Africa is different than Anglophone Africa, East Africa is different than Southern Africa, and understanding that nuance through these types of consultations helps us make sure that our policies work well for everyone. So that's in brief what Facebook does, but I think that in order to really understand how it works, it requires a more in-depth engagement with the platform, and I'm happy to answer questions about that later.
Thank you, Jen. And we are going to open up and hear what you want to share with everyone in here. But I would like TG to say something about feminist methodology. I know it's something you're a little bit passionate about, and I think it's helpful in this conversation. Please take the mic.
I think I have said a bit more earlier. I think one of the critiques that we have been doing, especially from quote-unquote the global south within African context, as historically being a subject of research, is that we want to really stop doing gender mainstreaming and tagging along gender as one of the categories for research. It's mainly to marketize for funders, to tick in the boxes, and how do we move away? And I think being vocal about it is really, really a good thing, but without providing a solution might be really doing it halfway in some ways. And so from FERN perspective, like I said, mostly equally as we are interested within the empirical findings, we are much more also interested in the methodologies and the ways in which we do conduct research. So feminist research methodological principles actually looks at, in a way, a very reflexive process, and also disrupting the whole traditional understanding of ethics. Mostly within this kind of sector, ethics is about consent. But actually, ethics is much more that. And if we try to think about it from a feminist reflective point of view, then your research starts from the beginning to the end of your research process. You kind of have to be reflexive in the ways in which you conduct your research. And your ethics really comes from a space where, who am I in relation to this research? What am I bringing in? What are my biases? What are my standpoints? What are my privileges as a white person or as a black person in this community? What am I doing? Am I creating harm to my participants? For example, specifically when we do research on gender-based violence, we tend to ask questions that are very traumatic. In some ways, we are asking our participants to respond and remember the pain, which means you are opening up this pain. And because we are interested in the findings of the research, we don't pay attention to the things that we are creating, and we don't even know how to close that wound. And at the same time, from a researcher's perspective, as a woman researcher especially, we are a product of the society, and we have experienced violence in one way or another, which means you are also partly reminded of this and that. And so how do you deal with those kind of things? And also, in many ways, especially within this kind of work, one of the things that we don't get accustomed to is showing messiness. And I think in research, the messiness is also part of the knowledge. And so to show the ways in which you struggle with power, to show the ways in which you kind of get the trust of the participants, and those kind of small but very important kind of experience need to come forward. We have just published on our genderit.org our first edition with our partners about their experience around their fieldwork. And it really reveals a very extraordinary knowledge around how people struggle to do a feminist research with keeping in mind that you have to keep on disrupting power, you have to keep on giving value to the knowledge that the participant is providing. And you're not only there as an expert, because as much as you are, but the participant is actually much more experienced in what you want to look for. And so those kind of things are very much embedded in feminist methodology. And I think it's very, I know many times people say like, it's so tiring to think about this. I just want to figure out about this, and then I want to move away. I understand that, I really understand. And also there is a pressure with donors that you need to give them this and this specific time. But it does not do it a justice to just immediately provide this information and move on. Because in the end, we don't really have a grasp of how complex this is, specifically within online gender-based violence, how complex it is to understand the entanglement of public discourse, like offline discourse and online discourse. So it's important that we invest our time in understanding different methodologies and then pay attention to reflexive work.
I think there are a number of researchers in here as well, and even if you're not a researcher, I think the feminist methodology is something very key to us. I would like to bring the conversation down there. Anybody with a comment or anybody would like to share the experiences already, yeah, see the hands I've seen, yeah. And anybody who wants, or if you want to ask a question as well, let's just feel free to talk about these issues. So you're welcome to share with us. Yes, you first.
Thank you. My name is Martha Chilongoshi from Zambia, and I just want to add to what she just said. But my comment would be more focused on feminist methodologies, but also more on the mental health and of the person who's carrying out the research. I think much as we are talking about women's digital leadership, sometimes we overlook how much we absorb from the platforms that we're using and how much trauma and impact we get from the research and dealing with gender-based violence and talking to people about their trauma and their problems. And I think that if you keep going, and yesterday we had a session on ending politeness and disruptive power. And I think to be able to disrupt power, there's a certain amount of anger within you as a person that you must have towards the systems in society. And that takes a toll on you as an individual. And so I think that sometimes it's important to take a step back, as much as you are using these platforms, to take a step back and process how much you are absorbing from these platforms and the trauma that you're dealing with in helping people overcome gender-based violence and trying to break that wall in terms of getting systems and law enforcement to recognize that it's a problem. It's also important for you to process how much you're taking on from society as a feminist. So I think it's important to take a break. If you need to stay away from digital platforms for a little bit, please do that, because it's important from the perspective of a feminist who's trying to disrupt power. And it impacts on you as an individual. I think you can't really disrupt power effectively if you don't realize how much it's affecting you as you're trying to navigate those spaces. So I think it's important to also know that you don't owe anyone an explanation or how do I put this in a polite way? You don't really have to feel bad as a feminist for taking some time away from some of these spaces to process just how harmful they can
Yes.
be sometimes. So that when you come back from that, it's easier for you to then share that experience as part of the experience of using digital platforms. So not only as a researcher, your participants are important, but I think there's a lot of experience that comes from you as a researcher, you as a feminist who's navigating these spaces and how much that impacts on you to contribute to the conversation around how digital spaces influence how we relate with power in society. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Let him have the mic. Oh, I need to, okay. Yes, please go ahead.
My name is Medika from Kenya. My first question goes to Cecilia. What are the successes and failures of the recent concluded Miss President, the one that was funded by CEDAW together with the European Union? So if you can highlight the lesson learned from the project, it will be good. Then my second question goes to Nyanya. I understand from your introduction you're a communication specialist. So I'm introducing the concept of framing and posturing when it comes to issues of women empowerment. You will realize that feminism together with women's rights and human rights, there are different levels of framing because ideally women's rights are human rights. Then you will agree that when we do empowerment, there is always a backlash on how people frame these issues, right? For example, when you are answering, I request if you can make a reference that we are all women panelists. So from that reference, if you can contribute on that, it would be fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let the lady have, and then we bring the mic around here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Anna from DRC. I'm leading the Women in Media organization in my country. And I will use English and French to explain my idea. Thank you, Peace, for giving the floor to women to speak about the leadership of women in the digital. Yes. Je voudrais parler de l'implication des hommes dans le leadership des femmes. Pourquoi? Parce que quand nous intervenons, les hommes constituent parfois des obstacles. Je donne un exemple. Dans mon pays, nous menons des actions pour justement promouvoir ce leadership. Et il nous est arrivé, lors d'une rencontre des sensibilisations des députés, de parler justement de ce leadership des femmes. Et nous avons été attaqués publiquement par plein de députés qui nous disaient que nous voulons créer la confusion dans les foyers parce que pour ce député-là, sa femme devrait demander l'autorisation pour s'exprimer, utiliser son droit de s'exprimer. Donc, vous voyez, impliquer les hommes dans ces leaderships est très important. Et donc, c'est pour ça que j'ai salué l'intervention de notre frère du Sénégal pour parler de cette liberté-là, de ce leadership des femmes. Donc, c'est important qu'on puisse donner aussi une place importante aux hommes pour participer à ce leadership. Merci.
I'll do a quick translation. So my sister from the DRC works for a group on women in media, and she was applauding the speech by Monsieur Diop of Senegal because she says that men play a big role in advancing women's digital leadership. She gave the example of an activity that her group did in the DRC where they tried to raise awareness among MPs that women's digital leadership and participation in politics should be supported, and that as a result of this engagement they were publicly attacked by members of the government who basically told them that they were creating confusion within households because women should ask for their husband's permission before participating in politics or taking public speaking roles. So this is to highlight the challenges that women face in our context across the region.
Thank you. Jen, for the translation, and thank you, Anne, for sharing that with us. I know, yes, we will bring the mic somewhere here to the gentleman and the lady here. Yes. Oh, sorry. Who was the first?
We can take these two and then we answer. Okay, there.
Maybe we can take the two questions, and please give excuse us a bit, then we can answer this, and then we can come to you after that, so we can keep. We still have 30 minutes, so we'll have a real conversation. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. My name is Abdurrahman Maulud. I'm from Sudan. English language is not my primary language. So, as you know, during the Sudanese revolution, many political activists, female, have been raped by the government, to limit their activity on politics. The thing is, about Facebook, hope you know that it's a little bit different between countries. So in Sudan, if you have a picture on social media with top strapless, that is same like nudity. Okay, so I think that maybe Facebook and other social media websites or platform have had to change their rules about this, because in Sudan it's like a big problem. In different countries it's no problem. So people use this picture of political females to limit their activity and for revenge. So another thing, how civil society can help women to stop violence against them.
Hello, Sarah from Sudan. Actually, I'm very grateful to attend this conversation. The first question is for Jim from Facebook. Okay, about the privacy policy, I think Facebook needs to be more restrictive regarding the privacy policy. In Sudan, we have a big problem on taking other people's photos and post it as a fake identity. So when you go to the court, you will not gain anything. So I think if you just enhance the tool of checking the picture and who first published this picture or any other authentication tool, so we will be more comfortable as women online. The other thing, I have a comment about women participation in politics. You all hear about the revolution in Sudan. So women were in the front lines. All the time we hear that you are Kandaka. Kandaka is the women queen. For anyone here, women have been governed Sudan ancient time, centuries ago, and now we put in the back. So about the revolution, we were in the front lines. We were participating. I think in any protest or demonstration, the number of women are bigger than men. So when the revolution succeeded, and we start negotiation with the military component, so they just send women home, and there is no any representation of women. It was like male cocks. So this is my comment. We still have a problem with representation in politics. And now after we are lucky to have a prime minister like Dr. Abdullah Hamdok. He's a very open-minded person, but we still have a problem with representation. We are not being represented in a good way. So we still have the ministers that I think it is not that important, not like defense or health or education. So this is just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, if I got your name right. Okay, so let me give the panelists some time. Yes, I'll come there to just answer Nyanya and Cecilia. You had some question, and then Jan as well. And then we can get more questions, please.
I'm Kenyan. Yeah, okay, so Miss President was a show in one of the TV stations in Kenya. It was basically running for president but in this particular show, well, one of the success is women believed that they can do it. I saw some of my students actually applying for it, and some of them went for it, and they didn't make it. But the fact that they took the first step to do it, we live in a patriarchal society where we believe like some positions are left for men. So Miss President was just a way of opening up that, removing us from that stereotype and showing showing Kenyan women that it is possible to be a Miss President. And another thing is, most of the campaigns were online. Actually, like 100% was online. So another success is the use of the digital platform. And that's why we are saying that this digital platform is the vehicle of the future, and the future is now. And we as women cannot allow to be left out of that space because of online gender-based violence. We cannot allow the digital divide to be growing wider every day because of fear of being online. So the biggest success for me was the fact that they used the online platform to campaign, and the people that the person who won that title won it fair and square. We come from a country whereby winning an election, anyway, story for another day.
Medica, so your question was actually, most of the time in your work you're experiencing people questioning why certain organizations were focusing on promoting women's rights while they felt like human rights is universal. Is it what you meant? Excuse me. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 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 Definitely, definitely. Oh, actually, it is a very nice question and interesting one, because I'm the first person in general in my work to say that it is not necessarily interesting to all the time have only women around the table in women's right conversation. Not because women are not able to handle their issues and talk about them and found strategies by themselves, but because actually men are part of the issues somehow. So I definitely understand what you mean, but what I say generally as well is most of the time it comes from those kind of remarks and, okay, we feel left out, why this, why that, are just kind of in ways to find back doors to create distractions, in my humble opinion, in a way that we all know that human rights are universal, but women are the one as part of this humanity which are all the time denied their human rights. So it is totally normal and legitimate to have this kind of focuses. It doesn't mean that we want men to disappear or that they are not part of the conversation. They are indeed part of the conversation as part actually of the problems and also hopefully of the solutions. This is something that I truly believe in, and also I mean the intervention of the lady from Zambia resonated with me, because I all the time tell people I'm an ultra private person with her finger trapped in very public affairs. So this creating your own space, you do not have to all the time be all over the place. You do not owe people all the time to explain yourself, to justify yourself. And even in your work, you can have many contents, but you also can feel like waiting for some time to process it yourself as a feminist, as a professional, as a human being, as a citizen in your country, before you find the right timeline. This is a smart move, I think. But Metika, it seems like you mentioned also in your question one part which is for me an opportunity to raise something also regarding the question of Jane earlier, when she was saying that she was sometimes in a very challenging position where you have this historical African woman background where they have been participating and having been front in their community through eras, and the fact that now in the contemporary era we are struggling. So I spoke recently with a psychologist which has something like 30 years of working experience dealing with gender-based violence in around Africa, and he actually said that, look, we are confused communities because somehow we are trying to go forward towards sustainable development by going backward in terms of the participation of inclusion of the majority of our population. So, for example, you lady from Sudan, I definitely understand you. Like in Burkina Faso, for example, their recent revolution, actually, a lot of people don't realize it, but by the time the Burkinabe women were down the street and having those wooden cooking tools, a lot of people miss that, but culturally and socially, this is the worst process, the toxic masculinity in their culture. And it was detrimental in the success of this movement. So this was my intervention and my answer to Metika.
Jean, you have something to say about that? Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Nyanya, for closing the conversation with this. And thank you for bringing the Sudan's revolution in this context. I think it's very important and timely. And for me, as an Ethiopian, I mean, looking at the situation in Sudan, it's so uninspiring because often women will do the work, and then when it comes about power sharing, then they sit back. But resisting the erasure, resisting the situation in that spaces just needs to be really boldly talking about, as opposed to the situation around like how violent it was. And I think we have to popularize that. And that was also what happened in Cape Town and in South Africa within the student movement, how the young women were resisting the erasure of their protest and their activism from the platform and being hidden away from that space. So it's very important for the African at the moment specifically, because we have a lot of social movements going on, for us to learn from each other and then to really inspire by stories of Sudanese women, stories of other South African women. And Janya mentioned which country?
Burkina Faso.
Yes, Burkina Faso. And so to keep on really build on that, and so that it makes a lot more sense in terms of taking away the danger of symbolic representation. And that's what worries me about my country too. I mean, having equal parliamentarian or work might be good on the face of the politics, but what does it mean when you have the power? Are you still working on it? So is it symbolic, or is it just tokenism? So for us to really pay attention to that kind of things, yet being excited, of course, and publicize it as much as we can, because we need to do that. Thank you.
Jen, you can take the question.
I'll be very brief. I think that you both from Sudan, thank you for your feedback. You raised very important points. One thing that I didn't mention before, but which is a pressing concern for the whole team that I work on at Facebook, is that we need to increase reporting from this region, right? Facebook is a platform that is basically tailored and conditioned by the type of feedback we get from users, and for different reasons, we don't get enough reporting from this region. I think it's people's understanding of the platform. I think it's all around digital access and digital skills, and whether people understand how much it takes to actually report content. And it's work that my team and I want to improve so that the platform is more tailored to the new audiences that use it. So I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. And afterwards, you can find time to interact with her and know more on how you can report, because we have a lot of these things happening, so we should report. We should not just complain from out. So I will go on right to the lady who has waited so much. And please, Jimmy, I know you're putting up your hands. I would like you to share with us more, coming from Uganda Police, and you've interacted with these issues so much, people reporting these cases to you. I would like you to tell us how it's been, how your experience has been interacting with these issues as someone who knows a lot of cybercrime and being a police person. Yes, lady, you're welcome to give us your comment.
Hi, my name is Adita. I'm coming from the US. I'm working in Sweden, and I work for an organization called FIFA, and among others, one of
you. And then we have a hand here, and yes, before you came in, actually, I asked everyone to come in. So actually, I'm not going to take questions from people who are behind there. I'm joking, but I asked before that people should come in front. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi, thank you so much for the great panel. I'm Hussein from Sudan. So I just want to ask, like, how much is the input of like different minority, religious, and like ethnic groups is taken when making policies? Because I have personal experiences with Facebook where I reported some images that mock Muslim women, and I was told then that it's freedom of speech. So I wonder why.
Thank you. Jimmy is there. Let's listen to Jimmy, and then we will come right to you. Jimmy is somewhere here. The gentleman here. Mm-hmm. You can just show me with your hands if you have questions, then we can, after him, we come to you. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you very much.
engage them, not just waiting when things go bad and people are demonstrating. Engage them constructively. I believe the law enforcement people have a gray matter on such instances and would like to bring more people of such caliber so that we can all jointly work and see how to protect digital rights.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jimmy. Let's have him speak. Do we have some more people who have some questions, some comments? Oh yes, we have to. Yes. Okay. Please go ahead.
Her power. How can we take these thoughts that we've been discussing here, these ideas, these principles around digital women's leadership, and start to embed them in our school curriculums, in our parenting, in our mosques, and in our churches? I think that if we begin to inculcate these values at the earliest stages possible, we will be able to, we will no longer need to have this kind of dialogues and panels and activism or advocacy, because we will have started at the foundation. I think right now we're playing a lot more catch up, where we have been able to tackle issues at a much earlier stage. I would love to hear from the ladies out there what your thoughts are around engaging with the people who are responsible for the development of today's women, tomorrow's women, as they're born and as they're bred.
Thank you. We have some 2 hands here. We have a few minutes left, less than 10 minutes now to go. Thank you for the people bringing out, speaking now. You're giving us way forward, you're giving us recommendations, which are things that we would like to hear as well. And then you would like to know more from the panelists, but I think anyone out there who has something to throw up on the questions you're asking is free to do that. Please go ahead with your question.
Mine is more of a comment. I know we're talking about overall gender-based violence, but I actually believe that this is coming because of what we think as a society outside the what will it be? Because most of the people, when we say equality, when we say gender equality, when we say women empowerment, they will think that it means we're planning to destroy the family unit. We're planning to make people just independently as themselves, not as a family, not as a unit. And some of them, they even say that it's the responsibility of a woman to raise her kids. If you think of an animal, he just makes her pregnant and he leaves and she's the one to take care of the kids. So when we have a society that thinks like this, unless we try to change this code, unless we try to show the society, even the men, not just the women, not just teaching the women their rights and their power, if we start educating the men as well about what's the responsibility, what's right, which will make a good family, rather than just saying women rights, I think we can make a difference. We can change this gender-based violence.
Let's see, with the gentleman behind. Oh yes, have the mic. I know for a fact that they've been implementing a similar project in the Gambia on women's violence online.
Yeah, thank you very much for your contributions. I just want to find out, especially as the discourse focuses on women's digital leadership. We have a lot of female parliamentarians now across Africa. Whether it's Safe Sisters or any other group, what they are doing in helping our female parliamentarians for them to be able to promote themselves and their work better online. Because I feel it is very important where we also know what our female politicians are doing and how those, especially you women within that space, helps contribute to the success of their work, because it says a lot. Then a comment I would like to make, we have a lot of things within our police forces across Africa in terms of whether it's gender-based violence and stuff like that. All these police officers, a lot of them really don't understand all these things. For me, I feel it is very important that there's a cohort of young women police officers that are trained on the aspects of digital security, so they're able to mitigate their own problems within their own communities. And I don't know if there's anyone working in that space, because that's what we're trying to do with my colleague in Gambia, Anna, and as well as I'm talking to please. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We have about 3 minutes. I don't know if we have time enough to extend this conversation. Maybe I will bring it back to the panelists to answer some of the questions and then also give your last remarks. So we start with Jan, and then you give your last remarks as you answer the questions.
Okay, I'm going to be very brief. I want to give other people a chance to talk. In general, I'll answer the question about minority rights being reflected on Facebook, and also why we don't have regional community standards. I think our community standards are set to be global because we want to be principled in our approach. If we begin to make exceptions, you can imagine what a slippery slope that would be. Some governments would say criticism of the ruler is hate speech, don't allow it. Other governments would say women shouldn't talk about sex on our platform. So it's a very delicate balance if you start to cater to different cultural norms. I think what we are trying to do is to understand the specificities of safety and vulnerability and ensure that people remain safe on our platform while also providing a space for expression. Now, to take off my Facebook hat and speak as women's rights activists in general, I think that, you know, the women's rights movement also needs to recognize that when we give women voice, just like Monsieur Diop gave the example in Senegal, we also expose them to threats, right? There's a huge backlash when women actually take their rightful place in political discourse. So I wonder how we can be better when we provide voice and participation access to also provide the skills to protect themselves and to be safe and not to become targets. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, did we have more questions for you?
I think I would just want to add onto his comment about the law. As I said before, the law needs to catch up with technology. And I think we are trying to get there, speaking from the Kenyan context. I'll give an example. There was a time there was a Miss Kenya, and her photos were leaked online by her ex-boyfriend, and she took him to court. And after a very rough storm, she won the case. However, she was only given as a compensation $10,000 US. That time, her crown had been taken off. And at the same time, she became the villain because the society started condemning her. So the online gender-based violence gives you a life sentence, and the person who started the whole thing just gets a slap on the wrist. So what I would want to say is the law needs to catch up. We need to enlighten the law officers on the issue of online gender-based violence and how to tackle it. That includes taking the laws, the bills to parliament on how to go about it. At the same time, I concur with him that you have to be very, very careful of what you post online. Then it goes back to the issue of someone saying, it's my space, I can do whatever I want with it. So I think what you need to know is, where are you from? What is accepted in your culture and what is not accepted in your culture? You have to guard yourself. As she was talking about self-care, know what is worth being outside there, because the internet never forgets. It has the memory of an elephant.
Thank you. TG, yes, and then your last remarks, please.
So there are a bit, I must be honest, there is a bit conflicting feelings in me, and in terms of responding to trying to create a community standards as opposed to a globalized one, and at the same time respecting culture and knowing your culture. I think there is this a very difficult gray areas, and also it goes back to his question about how do you, when a Sudanese have a certain kind of social order around racing and others, and how do you balance that kind of thing? I think we really need to think about it very carefully, because then we need to have, at some point we need to know where we stand politically, and we cannot, if we are saying we don't want to play catch up, and at the same time we're saying, okay, maybe we should be playing this. I think there needs to be some work needs to be done. And I know it's difficult and it might be a slippery slope, but it needs to be come from the community standards, because we're trying to think about decolonization in any way. And so also I do not know, I didn't understand, or I didn't see the platform policies and stuff, but if it is like to reevaluate it, what does it mean to think of globalization in terms of within the context of power dynamics between the North and the South, donors and all that kind of thing. So it would be good to really push a little bit further. I have to say that. And the next thing I want to say, sorry, I will finish, is that I wanted to respond to that gentleman who was telling us about how do you raise women to be, independent and stuff. And it's the same question from him about how do you take civil society to take responsibility around gender-based violence. And I want to respond as a mother, and I raise my daughter to be independent as much as I can. And I think it starts from within your family. I think it starts in your own context. And I often say, like, men, if they're not doing the violence on their sisters, and I don't understand why it could be violence on the other women, And also at the same time thinking about girls, and to not say, don't do this, be protective, you are vulnerable. I think we also, as we create some sort of vulnerability from the get-go, and that is not empowering. I think to train your child to be cautious of the environment around her is in many ways making her feel like she's not as free as she should be. So as a mother and a feminist, I would say that it has to start from the family, and engaging within the online security spaces like digital security and other things, and like educating them really. And you're right, we have to start it from school. The school needs to start teaching about what is the digital platform is, what is good about it, what is bad about it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be gendered. And we are in this space because we are living in a patriarchal system, and that is what is the most problematic thing anyway. And I want to, yeah, thank you.
And let's hear from Nyanya.
Okay, I would like as well, as much as Tigis, to intervene as well in this educational point of view. It is high time, I think, that we literally all agree to develop and promote a real human rights culture in our societies and communities. I am a little bit bored about this version of so-called education, which is all about how many people have been in this kind of specific schools, how many people have succeeded in this national exam and such. I know it is part of the whole panel of education, but in terms of transmission of values, from one generation to another, in terms of protection, in terms of promotion, in terms of the promotion and to make sure actually that those values becomes consensual and long-lasting and actually efficient. This is very detrimental. And I think also, as a feminist, as a Senegalese citizen, I consider myself somehow privileged because no matter what, we kind of have some kind of very progressive legal frameworks, for example, cyber criminality and this kind of cases of revenge porn. We have had some cases recently, and the legal system has been very harsh to the perpetrator, on the men, and even sometimes female, which are just out of jealousy, hurting other women by disclosing and sharing their intimate content and certain things. And in my point of view, That's what I told you yesterday. This panel should be more like Africans' women leadership through digital spaces, because we somehow have the power we don't exercise. And this is where I will be ending. It is high time that women actually start being interested in what their rights literally means. Simply, not just because you're a legal one, you're a legal practitioner or not, but just not just simply stay in the superficial version of things, but actually go in the text, in the content, ask questions, and start using them and exercising your power. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nyanya. Thank you very much, ladies panelists, and thank you very much, our dear participants. I think the conversations were really important. Let's keep the conversations going as we get out, interact with us, talk about these issues. And my recommendation or my last remarks is that as you do digital security trainings, as you interact with these different key stakeholders, please let's make sure we have the police involved. Let's make sure we are involving schools. These are the younger generations that we need to teach, and we need to let them know about these things. Let's share knowledge widely, and let's use our social media platforms to talk about human rights. Let's use our platform to talk about these issues that we always talk about.
Really the question of Ponsley about the female parliament, which is very important. In my point of view, what sometimes happen on the ground is that as much as they can be engaged, they are somehow bound to their political parties. And you have also this very challenging situation where in a political party, you know that, for example, in the case of Senegal, we have the parity law, and women have for years been the ground and of mobilization, and they actually hold the political parties, but they are not the one leading them in terms of representation and the highest level of those semi-elective or elective institutions. So, for example, in Senegal, you have the network of female parliamentarian member, and they are doing a lot of work on gender. They are focusing on gender, but in terms of digital leadership, maybe very few of them actually are very active, but also it has a lot to do about the tech savviness, personal tech savviness, rather than not being interested in promoting yourself and embracing actually your woman leadership, digital leadership.
Thank you. Let's just end with a round of applause for ourselves. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the sessions.